Hey guys, welcome to Ask Truth Apologetics. I am here with my good friend Peter. You can't see him right now, and you'll never see him because he is just behind his name on a Zoom thing. So um, I'm just going to kind of jump in and let you know that I have made a big mistake when it comes to translating the Greek, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But my friend Peter here was kind enough to offer me some advice and was able to. Sorry, I'm trying to expand this up a little bit. And he was able to take basically a Zoom call from me and help me understand where my mistake was and how we can go about correcting the error, and of course answering the question, because this was on Lloyd's channel and I actually did a video on my own channel using my false argument to debunk one of Deedat's claims. So I'm going to also continue to debunk Deedat's claims with the help of Peter. So without any further ado, Pete, how are you, man?
Not too bad at all. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So just give us a little bit of a background of kind of your knowledge in the Greek, and kind of how everything got started for you there.
Okay, well, back in the 1960s, the late 1960s, I went to the University of Toronto, actually originally planning to become an astronomer, and then discovered ancient Greek, and that ruined the astronomy. I fell in love with the language and the history and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So I spent 4 years learning classical Greek, which would be the Greek written and spoken by the Athenians in the 5th century and 4th century. And I then all of a sudden fell in love with Homeric Greek and started specializing in that as well. Koine Greek, which is the Greek that's used in the Bible, I was given a slight familiarity in passing by the professors because you have to, because that has to do with the development of the language.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it doesn't change much. If anything, it's that classical, or sorry, Koine Greek got much simpler to use.
Mm.
And if any of your listeners know modern Greek, it's even much more or it's even simpler than Koine.
Hmm.
And there seems to be a movement in Greece to simplify that language even more, meaning
Even
it's a
further.
continuing
So
process.
so you so basically you learned the hardest version of Greek. Is that basically what you're telling us?
Yes. And yeah, the Athenians were, I don't know exactly how to describe it. And it's probably because of what comes down to us. It came from philosophers and
Mm-hmm.
historians and that. They, I think, purposefully made the Greek a lot more difficult than it had to be
Yeah.
possibly pretentious.
Oh,
Whereas when
really?
you get to the Hellenistic period, which is the period between classical Greece and Rome, that started simplifying, and they used an easier to read Greek, in my opinion, or they
Yeah.
wrote more easily.
Well, and sometimes I think genius is found in simplicity, right? So they go from the super complicated, complex language and
Uh,
they just continue to simplify it. So I like that.
yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Well, cool, man. So what I'm planning on doing, and by the way, thank you for kind of sharing that information. What I'm planning on doing is just kind of going through the presentation. Before I even put this together, I actually sent this to you. And you kind of reviewed it, added a few suggestions, corrections. We went through it again. I edited it again. So I think it'd just be really awesome to have you along to help make sure that we're getting the correct information out there, so that when we refute people, we don't do it through lies or anything like that. And if we do make a mistake, I think it's important for all of us to work to correct that mistake, because we all are seeking truth. So let me pull up my PowerPoint and I will get this thing rolling and get it moving from the front. I'm going to refresh my page. Hopefully, everybody in the chat, you can see and hear us just fine. I want to make sure that everything's coming through. I'm going to check my thing over here as well. I never do this live. I usually rely on Lloyd um, to to do everything. So I'm kind of all by myself in this sense.
Yeah.
Um, feeling awful now for Lloyd because he has about 10,000 different screens up and running. Paying attention to this, that, and the other. So, I think there's a 20-second delay, so it looks like it's coming through perfectly here on the screen. So we're just gonna go through what my argument was, and where my mistake was, and we'll just kind of proceed through that. So as Pete was reminding me or informing me that I made a mistake, I was thinking about this quote, and it's different than how I remembered it, so I'll just read it how the quote actually goes. But it goes: "The great tragedy of science is the slaying of a beautiful hypothesis by an ugly fact." So, as I was studying Deedat's argument, I was looking back into the Gospel of John, looking into the Greek, and I found this interesting pattern, especially in the first chapter of John, where there seemed to me, as an English reader, to be two different words being used. It was theos and theon, right? So I said, oh, well, that's interesting, right? They both mean God, but they both are different things. Now, before I continue further, I want to remind everybody that that is incorrect. When I would go check some other passages that were highly contested, I would see that it was either a theos or theon. So I falsely attributed that information um, to being factual, right? So what my argument was, I'm going to run you guys through this really quickly. Is that we're going to focus on John 1:1 through 14 and 18, right? So the word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory, the glory of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. John bore witness about him, cried out, blah blah blah, right? So what it goes on to say is that no one has ever seen God, which in that particular form, and I'll explain to you why it is here in a little bit, and Pete will help me. It's theon, right? So no one has ever seen God theon. So I thought, that's interesting because Jesus I had equated with theos, right? The only theos. So it says no one has ever seen theon, and the only theos who's at the Father's side, he has made him known. What's interesting about my mistake is the actual conclusion I come to still works out, but it doesn't work out with the appropriate methodology. So just kind of expounding upon what I was saying and reminding you guys on every slide that this is not correct, even though it's a beautiful theory. Um, Theon and Theos were both translated as God, right? The Father is Theon, the Son, Logos, Word is Theos. That is incorrect, right? So what I was trying to forward was that there is a difference between God the Father and God the Son because of those two words. Now, there is a difference between the Father and the Son, but it's not because of those two words. We need to read into the context a little bit further, and we're going to see some really cool things um, going on. So, Pete, this was his original message to me. He says he totally disagrees with me. And he offered quite a bit of correction to it. And so I just reached out to him. We got a good email going. I had him just contact me personally via Zoom. We've had, what, 2, 3 conversations now, Pete?
Three, I think.
This will be 3 today. We're basically best friends at this point. We live probably, like 800 to 1,000 miles away from each other. We could probably go hang out at like Lake Michigan or something. Go to the dunes. Um, so this is the actual thing. So Pete, what I want you to do, buddy, and I'll have you kind of jump in whenever you feel like you want to, and just you're here to double check and correct me if I do say anything that's incorrect. So when we read John 1, we see Theos and Theon, right? So we read Enarche en ho logo, kai ho logo, ein proston theon, kai Theos, and or ein ho logos, right? So we
Yep.
see a bunch of different Greek words going on here. The ones that I want us to focus on are the ones that are for God, right? Or theon and theos. So you'll see on the screen here, there's an O looking thing and an E. Now, what are those two letters, Pete?
I'm not seeing anything on the screen. I'm seeing you.
Oh, you just see me? Okay, so probably
Yeah.
what's going on is I shared. Oh, I know what I did. I made it big on the thing so they can see me. Give me 1 second. I'm sorry, buddy. Um, let's see here. I need to pull up my Zoom. I need to share screen on my Zoom. That's what I need to do. Share. Okay, now you should be able to see this, right?
Yep, yep, perfectly.
Play from current slide. All right, everybody. I think we've got this looking pretty good. So Pete, down here at the bottom, right, we see the it's the theta, right? The O looking thing with the dash in the middle.
Yes.
Okay, and then next to that, what's that letter called?
Eta.
Eta, right? And so those two letters together are basically going to be the root word of God, right? When
Oh, sorry. I see. I see what you're saying. I was looking at the Theos saying halagos, so I
Mhm.
thought you were referring to the next word. No, that's an epsilon, a
Epsilon,
soft
okay,
E.
theta epsilon, gotcha. So those two letters are the root for God, which is the root for Theos or Theon, right? So
Yep.
the endings of the words have nothing to do with the person, right? Like I had falsely said. So the endings of the word are basically just in Greek grammar, and you can expound upon this a little bit. They're just indicating the relationship between the verb or the preposition. Is that correct?
Yes. So Greek nouns, which theos is,
Mm-hmm.
actually have a stem, which is that th or they that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is an ending which will tell you how that noun is going to be used in a sentence.
Mm.
Is it going to be the subject, the object? Is it going to show possession? Is it going to show something that's done to it? All sorts of things are determined by the ending of the verb. It's an inflected language, which means that endings um, change meaning.
Right, right. Okay, perfect. So yeah, I think that's making sure I understand it right. I think we do. So Greek grammar in that sense, right? So here is the word for um, theon, right? It's simply the this is the theta and epsilon. Is that what you said it was?
That's correct.
Okay,
So
with
that's the
a
stem.
that's the stem, right? So
Yep.
then you have kind of that dash or what did you say it was on the phone over top of the O? You said that was an intonation.
That's just a pronunciation
Mm-hmm.
symbol, an acute,
Right. So it's just like
it's called.
inclining, right? Is that what you're saying? You bring up the tone of it a little bit?
Yes, and that is not really part of the Greek language, even the written part. That
Hmm.
was added later on by scholars
Oh, okay.
to retain the pronunciation only.
Gotcha.
So
Interesting. Okay.
original Greek was only capital letters, by the way. So theta is a capital letter. The epsilon, that's a small letter. Same with the O character that follows epsilon. Those are all lowercase or small letters. That was created later on in the language.
Hmm. That's interesting too. So what this is doing, and if you guys ever go to Bible Hub or another website similar to it, underneath the words, if you guys see down here underneath Theon, you'll see an N-AMS. So all this is indicating is how the word is used within the sentence, right? So Theos or Theon, right? God, obviously that's a noun. The A stands for in the accusative, the M stands for masculine, and the S stands for singular. Now I'll have you explain the accusative because that's kind of the major aspect of what gives the ending. Is that right, Pete?
Yes. So the accusative is the equivalent of our direct object.
Mm, okay.
So some noun as a subject does some action, which is the verb,
Mm-hmm.
directly on some other noun. That other noun will now have to be in the accusative
Right.
for the Greek person to understand that and
Okay.
see it proper.
Perfect. So you basically just explained this slide here, so I'll jump past it, right? But we're just saying that endings of noun tell its case and its use. So this one in particular is in the accusative, and exactly like you said, it's indicating that's a direct object of the transitive verb. Except for in this case, this is actually a direct object of a preposition, right? So there are three prepositions, and this is what I grabbed from I think one of the websites you sent me. illustrate this dynamic. Note that these three have no accents, right? So, if you want to explain how it works with prepositions, that would be perfect.
Okay, most prepositions take a direct object,
Mm-hmm.
which means that the noun must be in the accusative
Okay.
case. However, there are some objects or prepositions rather that show ownership.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, um, in that case, it has to be in what is called the genitive case. So there's a specific ending for
Mm-hmm.
something that's in the genitive case. And the Greek reader or speaker would understand that or pick up on that and understand, therefore, the relationship of the nouns in the sentence.
Okay. So in first or in John 1:1, right, we see in the beginning was the word and the word was with God and the word was God, right? So
Yep.
when you say a relationship between like the two nouns, we're talking logos or the word, right? And theos. Is that what you're saying the relationship?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
perfect. And so just kind of when we're looking into this part of the sentence, right? We say ein pros ton theon. Um, so we've got the preposition pros,
Yep.
and the reason why theon has the I'm always going to use weird English words for this, the O with the dash and the V, is because how it relates to the preposition. Correct?
Yeah. It's the object of the preposition.
Perfect. So as we're reading through this, guys, I don't want to just focus on the language. I actually want to try to focus a little bit on understanding what is happening in the actual sentence, so we can start to draw out some conclusions from it. I'm going to get to that a little bit more in the future, but I want us to be thinking a little bit about that as we kind of go through it, right? So what we read here is the theon is written with the ov, right, as it relates to the preposition. Means the theon is the direct object of a preposition pros, which we've mentioned, and that we conclude that the logos, right, the word is with theon. Okay, so we're kind of starting to understand a few things that are going on here. We're going to move to the theos, right? To explain why it's theos, and so it's kind of the same way as theon, right? We have the root word, and then we add the os because it is in the nominative case. It's masculine, it's singular, right?
Yep. And its
Um,
subject.
yep. So we'll take a look at the cases here, right? Because this is actually related to a verb. And so the endings of a noun tells its case and use. So the nominative is the case of the subject. So in English, what would that mean? It would mean Becky was excited or he senses a problem, right? So we're just talking about how the basically the noun is being, right? Or what the noun is doing. Is that correct?
Yep.
Perfect. So when we get to and God was the word, or the word uh, was God. What we see here is Theos is written with the os at the end, right? Because it relates to the subject of the verb. This is where I get really excited, guys. This is kind of what gets me super stoked right here. So what we're reading here is we read in the beginning was, and I underlined was in green, um, because this is a really cool word. So in the beginning was the word, and the word was with God, and the word, or God was the word, or it should actually be, and the word was God, right? So uh, we pronounce the was ain. Is that correct, Pete?
Yes.
Okay, so we've got the ain sound in there. It's a verb, and it is in the imperfect form. It's in the imperfect tense. Um, and what does that mean, Pete, when it's in the imperfect tense? Because we don't really have that in English, do we?
It we do, but I'm not sure whether we really refer to it that way. But
Okay.
imperfect just means that it's something that is the action is not completed.
Mm-hmm.
When you say I ate an apple, that is a completed action.
Right.
Whereas I was eating an apple,
Mm-hmm.
that's an incomplete
Oh, I see.
action. That's as close as I can think of.
Okay, no, that's perfect actually. Yeah, that makes sense. So when we click on the ain, we see that the root word of ain is I me. So if I go to the Septuagint, let's say, and I read where God is telling Moses what his name is, and I'm reading it. Obviously, the Septuagint is the Greek translation of the Torah. What word am I going to see? Do you know this one, Pete?
Uh, no, actually,
So I think it's I have it written down a little
I
bit later. So we have Moses.
well, it should be a me. I am. I think he
Yes,
says in English, "I am that which will prove to be," or
right. It's translated. I've noticed a lot of different translations. Sometimes it's just I am that I am what I will be, stuff like that. Um,
well, if it's "I am that I am," that would be a me, which doesn't
yeah.
sound right.
So typically, from what I understand, is it's ego I me, right? So the I me is the I exist, I am. It's a present tense word. So when we see this ain, we notice that the root word is exist, and yet it's translated as was. And it's kind of like you were saying with the apple, right? So I was eating an apple, or I was eating an apple, right? It doesn't. It indicates that you could still potentially be eating that
Uh,
apple.
are you saying that if I look at the Septuagint, I'll see ego a me? Because
Um,
if because
in
that would say ego is I, is a
yes,
person,
uh
so it would be I am,
yes,
right, and that would be what he would say, and he wouldn't have to complete anything else. I am, no, I'm the existence, or however you want.
yes. Yeah. So if you go, it's actually hold on. Let me just scoot forward here. Yeah. So it's Exodus chapter 3, verse 14. So I'll just kind of skip forward. If you guys see that little picture I have down there at the bottom, and God said to Moses, "I am that I am," and He said, "So you must say to the Israelites, I am sent me to you." So in the Septuagint, that would be ego I me sent me to you. Right. So we're seeing.
Oh,
Yeah. Go
I
ahead.
understand why it says I am that I am. The ego
Mm-hmm.
is, it's not a verb, but it's really saying I.
Mm-hmm.
And then the me is the verb, but it's um, emphasizing
Mm-hmm.
that. And that's why later on he just says, tell them that I am sent me,
Yes,
as opposed to I am that I am,
correct.
So,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
Um,
I'm gonna
so it's just
get it.
to me, it's a very interesting parallel between those two verses, and I know there's a lot of different parallels that people draw with the ego I me thing, where Jesus is speaking to the Jewish people. He said, "Before Abraham was, I am." Same phraseology, ego I me.
Yep.
And that and then the Jewish people, obviously the Pharisees and stuff, they know what he said, right? So they immediately pick up stones to stone him. This is totally off subject, but I just find that to be so fascinating to see their reaction, right? Because us English speakers, myself included, I just read like before Abraham was, I am. That doesn't make any sense, right? Like I was, or I was there before. Like why would you say I am? But when you understand it, I think in the imperfect tense, it means that I was there and I'm still ongoing, right? It's kind of in that present tense shifted back into the past is what I said. So to pull this all back into the was, right? In the beginning was the word. Okay? So it means it was there and continues to be there. Is that correct, Pete?
Yep.
Yep. So, and the word was, meaning it was there and still is there with God, and God was the word, right? Or is still, or the word still is God. I just find it to be absolutely fascinating to read through this kinds of stuff.
Yep.
Um, yeah,
It
go ahead.
shows you what's neat about inflected languages, because it doesn't matter whether you say and God was the word or and the word was God. They're the same, because the endings determine the
Hmm.
grammatical interpretation.
Yeah, it's really neat. Um, So,
Yeah.
and
So
actually,
don't.
I need to include a link on here. There's a literally the day after I made my blunder, Dr. James White did a video going very deep into the Greek of John 1.
Cool.
So I kind of take that as a sign from God to go, hey, look, bro, like you got to make sure you got your stuff working appropriately. I'll put that link down at the bottom. He's actually done a shorter video. It was like an hour and a half long video, but he kind of shortened it up a little bit. So I'll leave that link in the comments section or the description box, or maybe both. So if anybody's interested in seeing that, it's really pretty powerful. A lot of the stuff that he gets into, and I think just kind of having this as a general base will help you understand it even further. The logos, right? So what we're learning is the logos is always, right. We know from the first phrase that the logos is perhaps eternal. I'll get into why we can determine he is eternal here in a minute. But what we learn in the next is the logos is what the logos is with, right? So we understand that the logos is with God, okay, and that God was the Word, or the Word was God, right? So we're seeing this interesting interplay. So the what we learn is that the logos is relational. It's relating to God, but the logos is also God, right? Um,
Yep.
so we're starting to see, we can't say Trinitarian language, right? Because we're seeing two persons, not three persons, but we are seeing that there are two different persons, so to speak, right, who have a relationship with one another that are um, identified as God in the singular, right? We're seeing it in the singular um, tense. I'm going to move this here real quick. So as we continue to read through John, we kind of see what the logos ends up doing. What does this logos do? Right now, we see it in John 1:2 and 1:3. We see that all things came into being, right, and nothing came into being that it didn't bring into creation, which essentially means that it didn't create itself. It was there before creation, meaning what? Eternality, right? So that's how we can kind of conclude that it wasn't just there at the beginning of the universe, it was there prior to, right? Because nothing came into being that didn't already exist, right? So if the logos is a created being, how could it possibly have created everything? Does that make sense? So um, so what ends up happening is the word became flesh and took up residence among us, right? So the word for took up residence among us is literally dwells in a tent or tabernacles. Okay. Now, if you guys remember tabernacle, right? The logos dwells or tabernacles in human flesh. Pete, what do you remember anything from the Old Testament with Yahweh's glory and something about a tabernacle? Do you remember that?
Well, what I remember most is that God's glory from time to time came down to the tabernacle.
Mm-hmm.
People can correct me on this because it's been a while since I've read this, but I think the term used was Shekinah, which is sort of this brightness or whatever.
Yeah.
So it almost sounds like there's something separate from God, but it isn't really. It is God
Mm-hmm.
in
Yep.
the tabernacle.
Yep. No, exactly. So there, the John, the author of this, is obviously attributing this logos to tabernacling in the flesh of the man Jesus, right? Who is from the Father, full of grace and truth, right? So we know that this logos is God, is with God, created everything, right? As we're reading through this, and enters into and tabernacles within the flesh of the man who did this logos dwell in? So the logos dwells in Jesus, right? Um,
Yeah. Um,
you thinking?
well, logically it has to. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
trying to think
Yeah, no, for
if there's a
sure.
counter to that,
Yeah.
and I can't come up with a way of saying no. So,
Well, if you come up with it, leave a line after the video, and we'll correct that one as well.
yeah, let. like I think John was trying to make it clear that God and what do you call it, the Word are essentially different aspects of the same thing. Your first comment, and the Word became flesh and
Hmm.
took up residence.
Yep.
It's I and and in bringing back to mind the glory. I
Hmm.
think he's saying the same thing. So all of this is just a very compact way of sort of providing you with the logic that
Right.
God and the Word are one.
Right. Right. So kind of just going through this, right? We know that the eternal logos is both God and relational God. This is indicative of two persons who are identified as God. Whoops. So here is the objection, right? And I'm gonna get to the objection that I was trying to answer in the video that I did on Lloyd's channel. Can God be seen? Right? So, what we read in verse 18 is that no one has seen God at any time. The one and only God, the one who is in the bosom of the Father, that one has made him known or has exegeted him. Okay? So, we have to ask ourselves this question. The author here, right, John, is saying that no man has ever seen God. But when we think about A, if Jesus is God, people have seen him. B, didn't God come in like a cloud of fire? Didn't he walk with Abraham, the oaks of Mamre? Didn't he, right? Like people have seen God. Didn't Jacob wrestle with God? Like this doesn't make any sense, right? So this seems contradictory. And I want to kind of explain this a little bit further and explain to you why it is not contradictory. And this will be my refutation coming up here on the next slide, or this will be building to my refutation coming up here on the next slide. So the word theophany, I don't think we use it as much. Maybe you guys have heard it before. It is actually a Greek word from theophania, if I pronounce that right, Pete. Um,
Yep. Yep.
which basically means a manifestation of a deity or God, right, in a sensible form. Now, I don't want us to get confused with what sensible means, right? We're not talking logical necessarily form. We're talking sense as in perception, right? A perceptible form, sight, hearing, taste, sound, feel, whatever it is. That's what the word theophany means. So there's a really good article, guys, here. 10 things you should know about theophanies. I believe this is actually from a book as well. I've not read the book. I did read the article, and I also stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night. But the guy who wrote this article, his name is Vern S. Poitras, I believe is how I might pronounce that. He's no slouch. He has a PhD at Harvard University. He's a doctor in theology university at Stellenbosch. He's a professor of New Testament interpretation at Westminster Theological Seminary in Philadelphia. Right? He's not really accomplished a whole lot. I don't know why we're reading about him. Um, where he taught for nearly 4 decades. He has taught for nearly 4 decades. Hey, that's like an imperfect. In addition to earning 6 academic degrees, he's the author of numerous books and articles on biblical interpretation, language, and science. So this is one smart dude, and smart in where we need him to be smart. So he gives us 10 things about 10 things we should know about theophanies, right? So the word theophany is a combination of two Greek words meaning God and appearance. A theophany is an appearance of God. More precisely, it is a visible display to human beings that expresses the presence and character of God. Examples include the thunderous display at the top of Mount Sinai, the burning bush appearances to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the cloud of fire in the wilderness, Micah's vision, Isaiah's vision, Ezekiel's vision, and John's vision and on his throne of Revelation. So it is a visible display to human beings that express the presence and character of God. So I want you to think about both those things: the presence of God, and it expresses the character of God, right? So theophanies reveal God using created media. So God shows who he is using visual displays like fire, clouds, sometimes a human shape. And the display may be accompanied by sounds like thunder, the voice of God, and other effects. So, Pete, as I'm going through this, do you have any thoughts about kind of what we're talking about with this so far?
No,
Okay.
I'm totally grabbed by what you say.
All right, gotcha, buddy. All right, so moving on to number three, God the Creator in His divine nature is distinct from created media that He uses in the theophany. Okay, so I'm thinking about the contradiction. I want you guys to be thinking about: is this a contradiction? No man has seen God at any time, and yet we're seeing God and hearing God and all this kinds of stuff, right? So how do I understand both of these statements to be true? Can they be true? Are they true? Or are they completely contradictory, right? But I think the answer is here in our theophanies. So at the same time, he shows himself in created media and is present in and through them. Since God is distinct from the world, he is not captured by the world and is not directly visible to us without created media. At the same time, he makes himself genuinely known when he appears. His appearance, and this is really important, guys, reflects who he is. Number four, theophanies in the Old Testament anticipate and foreshadow the permanent coming of God into creation in the incarnation of the Son. This is really cool. So, in the incarnation, the Son of God takes to himself a human nature while remaining the divine Son. Now, I get a lot of arguments from this. How can he be both? Blah, 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 right? He's using created media to display who he is, his character, and his likeness. So the Son is the permanent appearance of God among us, as Jesus says to Philip. Now, this makes sense, right? When you understand the theophany aspect of this, it all makes sense. So when Jesus says to Philip, "Have I been with you so long, and you still do not know me, Philip? Whoever has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, 'Show us the Father,'" right? So if we understand that Jesus is the full incarnation of God's character, 100% perfect as God's character, then that is the image, right? That is the theophany of the full revelation of God, the full revelation, right? Other theophanies might be character, character, character. Jesus is the full revelation of God. So the incarnation is a unique event in the whole history of the world, but it is foreshadowed by earlier temporary appearances of God. All the earlier appearances show beforehand something about the work that God will accomplish when Christ appears in the flesh. I mean, there's so much here, guys. I'm not going to think too much on it right now, but hopefully you guys' wheels are turning. Theophanies are of different kinds, right? So it's not always just one way or another. One example, it could include a thunderstorm, fire, a cloud of glory, a courtroom, a human figure, a warrior, and a chariot. Each of these highlight aspects of God's character in his dealing with us. Each foreshadows the coming of Christ. Each kind is mysteriously related to the other kinds. God does things through theophanies. Typically, theophanies function as founding events that establish continuing relations between God and his people. Obvious cases of theophanies fade off into cases that are not so obvious, right? So, in a broad sense, and I really like this one actually, in a broad sense, every encounter between God and man shows affinities to theophanies. God's presence with us is analogous to theophany. The general revelation of God through creation and providence displays God's character. So, I don't have Romans 1:18 completely memorized, but what's going on in 118 is basically Paul is saying that what can be known about God is present and shown to them through creation, right? Through nature. We just have an inherent understanding about the character and nature of God through his creation, right? Which they're kind of saying is a not so obvious theophany. And in this respect, is theophany like? Couple more here, guys. So the character of theophany reflects the Trinitarian nature of God, right? So God the Father shows himself through the Word, right? Logos, in power and glory of the Holy Spirit, right? So that's where we start to see the Trinitarian aspect of these things. Number 9, the most extended description of a theophany is in the book of Revelation. The climactic theophany consists of God dwelling with us in the New Jerusalem. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God. They will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads." Last one here, guys. The theme of the theophany and the broader theme of the presence of God are found throughout the Bible. So when we read the Bible and you see God, think about theophany. These themes combine to climactic fulfillment in Christ, and we all, with unveiled face, beholding the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another, for this comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. So when we get to Deedat's actual argument, it says, "No man has seen God at any time." He was quoting what I just quoted earlier. In First Timothy, God whom no man has seen nor can see. Exodus, and he said, "God can't see my face, for there shall no man see me and live." Right. But then we obviously see in Exodus 33 that Moses spoke to God face to face, just like Pete and I are speaking face to face, right, Peter?
Yeah, except you can't see my face.
Right. So, we were even talking about on one of our other discussions, we were even talking about how some of these could just be common phrases, right? It doesn't necessarily have to mean like a literal phrase. We just would use the
Yeah, they're
phrase,
idioms.
"Yep, we're speaking face to face, Pete." I mean, obviously you see my face, I don't see your face, but we're communicating in some form or fashion. And one of the things that I liked from the Theophanies things was he said God has theophanies through created media. I was thinking about this earlier, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do a very good analogy here. But let's say that I am a musician, right? I write a beautiful song, I record it. Um, the Nobody uses discs anymore, but let's say my CD, right, has my music on it. My CD is not playing any music, right? I need to have created media, especially a speaker, right, who reads it and vibrates at a particular way, and that gets the information that is essentially immaterial to become a material, audible sound, right? That's what we mean by created media. So the objection here, sorry, I went off track again. The objection here is that it's a contradiction. God can't be seen. God is seen. How do we reconcile this? And I think it's pretty simple, guys. We understand that Moses spoke to God face to face, whether it was an idiom, whether Moses actually saw a face. Was it a created medium? Was it a theophany? Right? Those are the types of things. So there's no contradiction here. These are very logical and reasonable answers. 70 people saw God in Exodus 24. Theophany. Jacob wrestles with God or sees God face to face. Theophany or idiom, right? Moses saw God's back. Again, another theophany or idiom. So when Jesus says no man, actually it's John who says that no man has seen God at any time, he means it. No one has actually seen the immaterial, spaceless, timeless, immaterial God, right, at any time. What they've seen is God incarnate, right, in the man of Christ Jesus. What they've seen is theophanies, whether it's flame of fire, cloud of pillar of smoke, burning bush, a man who comes and speaks with Abraham or Moses or whatever it is. That they have seen, which was directed by God. So just one little quick thing that I want to kind of talk through here, right? So I made a mistake. I as like most men, there's a little bit of an ego. But I like the truth more than I like my own ego. And what I really love to do, guys, is just have conversations like this. I love to educate and be educated. I'm not above reproach, I promise you. But I just feel this desire to get out to the world, to share the gospel, and to lead people to the way of the truth, who I believe is Jesus Christ. He is the way, the truth, and the life. Right. So as I was reflecting on this, and this isn't necessary. This is definitely not for you, Pete, nor for any of my Christian friends who corrected me, because on the video there's a lot of really good corrections. This is just in general. There's a lot of, I'll say, Muslim apologists, and I don't want to say the word trolls because that's too condescending, but I'll just say it anyway. Who like to say, and they talk big, but they won't actually get up here. They won't make a video. They won't call, and they won't debate, right? And this is what Theodore Roosevelt has to say to those people. It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, the one who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who never know victory or defeat. So I just kind of wanted to end with that. Pete, how you doing, buddy?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Just one thing to add. As far as your mistake is concerned,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be too worried about it. As you've already pointed out, it made no difference
Right.
in the logic, which is the important thing.
Mm-hmm.
But in the history of the study of the Greek language in that, there's a very famous man, archaeologist and an expert in Greek. His name was Sir Arthur Evans.
Mm-hmm.
He's the one who discovered the palace of Knossos on the island of Crete.
Mm.
So we know all we know about the Minoans from him.
Yeah.
Now, what he said after doing a couple of years of study is that he didn't know what the language was. They had the tablets for the called Linear B.
Yeah.
They had the tablets for the people who ran this kingdom, but they couldn't translate them. And he said, "We don't know what the language is, but I can guarantee you it's not Greek." And then in 1954, now this part I may have the story a little bit wrong. In 1954 on the BBC, a man named Michael Ventris made an announcement. He had translated Linear B finally. And what he said is, this is ancient Greek, a very complicated form of ancient Greek.
Yeah.
Now, the difference, I think, was Ventris, I think, worked in the Second World War as a decoder.
Mm-hmm.
So the German codes and that, he was part of the team that helped break that. So he had an advantage over what Arthur Evans had. So I don't really blame Arthur Evans for that, but it was one of the biggest mistakes ever made about the Greek language.
That's funny.
And yeah.
Well,
yeah. So as I said, don't feel bad, because one of the greatest names of all time, made a bigger one.
Yeah. Probably a layperson like me would have looked at it, been like, probably Greek, but that's just because I don't know anything. But
they did,
right? Probably Greek. It's like it's not Greek. So, well, I'm gonna check here real quick and see if there's any questions or anything like that on here, and then we'll get off of here. Before you continue, I have a question. So what do Muslims know? What is your question, sir? I think if he's still on with us, he said, what do Muslims know? Said, before I continue, I have a question for Steve. So I figured he may have thought your name was Steve. Pete with an S is almost Steve. So I'm not seeing anything come up right now, but we'll get back to your question, brother. If you end up watching this later, just go and leave a comment underneath the video, and we'll make sure to answer that for you. Hopefully, guys, you enjoyed today. Hopefully, you learned a little bit. Go ahead and check out. I'll put the link down there. Check out the thing from Dr. James White and how he exegetes the logos. I've put together a new presentation to exegete the logos even further, which is really cool. But we've been on so long, I'm not going to do that right now. Pete, man, thank you so much for
My pleasure.
one, just being um, willing to have the conversation with me. It was very, very helpful, very enlightening. I've learned a little bit about you. You know some pretty awesome martial arts, so that always gets me excited, which makes me understand why you follow Lloyd. But yeah, man, I just appreciate you, and everybody. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you guys had a great Easter, and we will talk to you guys all next time.